In this video, we are going to discuss using of APIs for collecting data from the web. Many researchers are interested in obtaining new kind of data directly from websites, but collecting large amounts of data from a website could become impractical. When done manually, this approach is prone to human error, and when automated, it may violate a website's terms of services. And instead, researchers sometimes use a tool called an API. And an API stands for Application Programming Interface. Web APIs provide a mean of communication between websites and users structured by some rules. In particular, they allow users to obtain clearly defined kinds of data quickly and by requesting it directly from the database underlying a particular website. And keep in mind that it is not necessarily because the companies are very kind at allowing you to do this. At the same time, there is an interplay between the customers and the website. Basically, although you're receiving the data from them, you're also sending some data to their database. So in this video, we are mainly focusing on the APIs that deliver data from the website to users. And many major companies have already started giving APIs to the customers, especially the developers who wants to get some data from their platform and do some meaningful analysis on them or build an application that is useful. TikTok, Twitter, Facebook are all some examples. I mean, to get the API, you need to go through an application form or some process for them, but still it is manageable at the end to get access to their data. And these companies, alongside many governmental agencies, have created public APIs, which provide easy access to their data to encourage developers to use their platform. So APIs provide data in various formats. For example, JSON probably is the most popular format, and the reason is that it is useful for structuring the data because it preserves the hierarchical structure and meta information about the dataset than, let's say, tab or comma separated files, such as CSV. I mean, and CSVs could be useful. You don't need always the hierarchical data. For example, if you are going to use Twitter API and get some specific information about certain hashtags, then you don't need all these hierarchies. Basically, what you're interested in is that who used this hashtag, when they used this hashtag, who are their friends. So these kind of things, and it could be very well contained in a CSV file. So it depends really on your use, but JSON is one of the most popular one. And it also depends on the programming language you're using. For example, there are libraries that make JSON data manipulation quite intuitive depending on the programming language that you're using. And talking about the programming language, in order to interact with an API efficiently across a variety of computer programs written in different languages, for example, Java or Python, researchers rely on API wrappers. And these tools, which exist for most popular APIs, allow a researcher, a programmer, scientist, to request data directly from an API while using their own programming language of choice. So it helps you not to limit the choice of programming languages, and you continue working with whatever you have been working up to now. So as you see, API are somehow another way of getting the data from websites, and instead of web scraping that you saw in the other videos in this lecture. And it's quite a straightforward of doing it, and it is pretty simple. There are several examples. For example, Twitter, as I said, is a very popular one. And there's already packages. For example, TweetPy is a good tool, a good library basically in Python that you could use for getting the data from Twitter. I'm getting back to that at the end of this video, how to go there and what to do and where we are standing now. Yeah, but similar to many things else, APIs have also their own drawbacks. Not in drawbacks in the sense that they are not doing what they are supposed to do, but using API come with some sort of limitations. And in short, the limitations are the batch sizes, the call allocation, and the concurrency. So what these mean? When we're talking about batch sizes, what we need to consider the size of the batches, which is basically the number of records being requested from the source and being sent to the target. Application-specific map connectors already have a property to count for these limits. So this is something that you need to be careful when you're sending your request. You need to be aware what is your limitations on each request, how many records you could really apply for to get downloaded. Basically, what it means is that whenever you're using an API, you need a bit of planning beforehand. How much data you need to have, how many requests, considering the batch size limit, you could get your data and these sort of things. So it needs a bit of planning before starting to use the API. The other limitation is the call allocation. And basically, some APIs limit the number of calls a user is allotted during a 24-hour period. This means basically that in the previous limitation, we talked about batch sizes, and we said that you probably could increase the number of your requests that you're sending to that specific website using the API so that you could download all the data that you need. But the call allocation could be another problem. I mean, for example, you could decide I'm going to send 100 requests to this website in these 24 hours and I get whatever I want to get. But there could be a limitation that 100 is not really actually the number that you could do your call allocation. It could be like, I don't know, 30, 50, 20. So this is another factor that you need to keep in mind when you are planning to use APIs. So until now, you need to know two things. What is the limit number of requests that you could send, number of records that you could ask for, and how many times you could ask basically to get that many records in a day. And that has impact on how you're defining your project. It is basically in this data collection phase, how much time it takes until you could collect all the data that you need to have. And always also keep in mind that things could not go according to your plan potentially. So always have a bit of room to wiggle. And the last limitation is the concurrency. And the APIs may have a limit on the number of active sessions an organization or user can have at any given time. This adds an implied constraint on how you interact with the API during the session. For example, an error may occur while performing a lookup to the same API you're using for the source data. So all in all these limitations that I said here is about how fast you could get to data. I mean, it melts down to that. It would be an ideal life if basically there was no limit on the batch size, no limit on the call allocation, and no limit on the concurrency. Then several users at the same time would send unlimited number of records, or I mean the many that you need, and then they would get it fast. But this is not the reality. You should plan how many people in your team can do it within your organization, how many times you can send requests within a day, and in each request, how many records you could ask for. And all these have impact on how you're going to do that. Still, APIs are pretty useful when it comes from getting the data from the web. And by that, this is the end of my presentation on using APIs for collecting the data. What I wanted to add here is that in this lecture, we talked about web scraping, we talked about API, we talked about different tools that you're using, you could use for web scraping. But I mean, there are some ready-made solutions, some plugins that you could, for example, install on your Google Chrome and get the data. And they are useful. No one says that you need to be very, I don't know, nerdy, tech savvy to be able to get the data you want. So you sometimes could just install these plugins and get what you need. Depends what is it that you are doing. As a personal suggestion, if you are doing a professional project or even a course project, when the requirement is really for you to do the actual web scraping, you're collecting the data through API, don't go for these plugins. But if it is for a personal project and it really doesn't matter how you get the data, it is the data that only matters to you, you could use these plugins. As I said in one of the other videos, when doing that, keep in mind the licenses. I mean, some of these plugins could actually download the data that you're interested in, but they are doing it illegally. Because this is on you as a human being to check the licenses. If it is possible to scrape the data from a website, the plugin really doesn't care what the policies are. It is on to you as the user to check all these written notes in the website's privacy policies that if it is possible to scrape the data. For example, it was some years back, I'm not sure now, but there were plugins that you could use on your Google Chrome and then scrape the information from LinkedIn. But then LinkedIn basically very straightforward said it's in its privacy policy that you really could not scrape the data. So this is something ethical and important to use because it could make some problems for you in future if you don't consider that and start getting the data and doing some analyzing and then reporting your output. And then the question will come that how did you get the data? With that,